Welcome to the Explainer. So, a minor party just sent a completely unexpected shockwave through a localized by-election down in Victoria. But honestly, this isn't just about local politics. It's actually a perfect magnifying glass for the overarching economic pressures that are reshaping the entire country right now.
25%. Let that sink in for a second. In the recent Nepean state by-election, the Conservative Liberal Party was expecting a pretty comfortable hold. Instead, the real shocker was One Nation capturing a staggering quarter of the primary vote. I mean, for a minor party pulling in that much of the primary vote in a single electorate, that is a massive data point that pollsters literally cannot ignore.
Which brings us to a really fascinating question. Why exactly did a minor party surge so intensely in a typically safe Liberal seat? Now, it is worth noting that Labour made a very specific tactical play to just not run a candidate here at all, which obviously left a bit of a vacuum. But even with that vacuum, how does a minor party scoop up such a huge chunk of the electorate? Well, here's our agenda for today. We'll start with the Nepean by-election surprise, move on to the demographics of the vote, look at testing political infrastructure, dive into polling the major parties, and finally unpack the economic undercurrent. All right, Section 1, the Nepean by-election surprise. Moving right along to Section 2, demographics of the vote. To understand this surprise, we really need to look at Nepean itself, because it's a district of stark contrasts. On one hand, you have 75% of the population living within just 2 kilometers of the beach, representing some pretty considerable leafy beachside wealth. But juxtaposed right against that wealth are intense pockets of working-class poverty, where folks are dealing with severe mortgage and rent stress. And this brings us to the real core of the demographic split. In those specific, highly stressed working-class pockets, One Nation astonishingly captured 40% of the vote. So this wasn't just some blanket sweep across the whole region, right? It was driven by a highly concentrated pocket of intense voter frustration that's tied directly to financial strain. Section 3. Testing political infrastructure. Now, analysts point to a highly tactical play by the minor party here. They actually weren't there to win outright. Instead, they were actively road testing their campaign infrastructure in Victoria. They wanted to validate their internal polling against real-world election day results. And perhaps most importantly, they demonstrated an unusually strong volunteer turnout. That's historically been a big weakness for the party. But here, they turned up in force. This strategic discipline was fully on display on election night too. Party leader Pauline Hanson deliberately stayed away from the electorate. By keeping a high-profile figure away, it proved their internal research was incredibly sharp. They knew exactly what the numbers were going to be, they knew they wouldn't win the seat overall, and they tactically managed their resources rather than chasing a lost cause. It's just a clear sign of a professional, well-oiled political infrastructure at work. Section 4. Polling the major parties. Zooming out to the state and national view, the established powers are facing a really daunting reality. At the state level, Conservatives require a historically massive 8% swing just to form government. To put that into perspective, that's a bigger ask than the historic Kennett win back in '92 or the Brack slide in 2002. Meanwhile, national polling sees both major parties stuck in the 20s, with the national coalition seeing only a slight uptick to 22%. It is a highly fractured landscape for sure. Within this fractured landscape, minor parties are finding strict limits, but also some distinct opportunities. They've hit a hard ceiling with Labour voters, sitting at a deep -50 satisfaction rating, meaning there's virtually zero capacity for growth on the left side of politics. But they still hold ominous growth potential with existing coalition voters. Now, to cap that minor party growth and alienate voters, opponents often deploy an objective political strategy that analysts call the Trump tactic. Basically, this is designed to push away moderate blue center-right voters by associating incumbents or minor party leaders with polarizing overseas figures like Donald Trump. And here's the thing, regardless of whether actual policies align, the association alone is used to tank poll numbers. This tactic reveals a real fragility among moderate center-right voters right now, making it a pretty powerful vulnerability that campaigns are actively exploiting. And finally, Section 5, the economic undercurrent. Ultimately, all of these political mechanics are just trying to navigate a much larger, totally unavoidable wave of reality. The underlying current here is a perfect storm of incoming financial pressures. First off, you've got sustained, relentless fuel costs, which particularly punish outer suburban and regional communities. Second, multiple upcoming interest rate rises. This has created such extreme financial pressure that it actually forced the federal government to completely abandon plans for seismic tax reform, just so they can recalibrate the budget for a crisis environment. Pollster Kos Samaras really hit the nail on the head when he said, the financial pressure that Australians are feeling is just enormous. Where that angst goes, we don't know yet. Political leaders are actively trying to steady the ship, but the baseline reality remains immense, everyday stress for the average voter. Which leaves us pondering this. As the basic cost of simply living continues to rise, and that 40% pocket of working-class frustration we saw back in Nepean potentially spreads, how will this everyday financial angst translate into sweeping, unpredictable political surprises at the ballot box next time around? It's a genuinely fascinating space to watch, and the numbers are definitely telling us to expect the unexpected. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.